Hi everyone, Tony from Hack the Movies here, and hopefully you watched the episode I put out earlier this week of my podcast where we debated what the worst Halloween 3 was. You might have remembered when we got to Halloween H2O that the film ignores the events of 4, 5, and 6 and starts over from part 2, which is why it is a Halloween 3. But what if I told you that 4, 5, and 6, or the Thorn trilogy as it's called, is actually connected to H2O? You'd probably think I'm crazy. And you'd be wrong, because there was a comic book that actually connected these two continuities. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Halloween, The Blackest Eyes was a 3-part series put out by Chaos Comics. It was written by Phil Nutman and Mickey Yablans. The editorial consultant was Daniel Ferrens, who wrote Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Both versions of that film, the theatrical and producer's cut, didn't really turn out how he envisioned it. So it's interesting that they brought him back not only to continue from the messed up lore from the theatrical version of his script, but also work in elements from a film that completely ignored his script. Yeah, it's very interesting. You'd be surprised how they pull that off. It seems like they had a ton of creative freedom with this series, and creativity is definitely needed when you're following up the events of H2O. In case you forgot or don't know, this is what happens to Michael at the end of that film. Now, if you did watch my episode from earlier in the week, or if you watched the Halloween Resurrection review I did with Movie Dumpster last year, highly recommend that episode, by the way, you might know that the idea of Michael switching with an EMT and coming back in the next film was actually created while writing H2O. It was a compromise so Jamie Lee Curtis could have the ending she wanted, where she kills Michael definitively, but the studio could also have a sequel and do more. Obviously, since they planned to make another movie, they didn't want that spoiler in a comic book, especially since I believe Halloween Resurrection was in development by the time this was being released, because this came out in 2001. Halloween Resurrection is 2002. It might have still been called Halloween Homecoming at this point. So yeah, the people behind this comic definitely needed to get creative, and boy did they. The mystery of how Michael is alive is pretty interesting. When I found out that this was a comic series that existed, I read it last year, and yeah, that was a real page turner for me. I really was invested and really wanted to know how they brought him back. And yeah, you'll see. Let's get into this comic. The first issue opens with Myers killing someone who is holding Dr. Loomis's journal for Tommy Doyle. This Tommy Doyle is writing a book on Michael Myers. He is no longer with Karen, Danny, or little baby Steven. He also looks nothing like Paul Rudd. The rest of the issue is Tommy reading Loomis's journal, and it's actually really interesting. We see Loomis meeting Michael for the first time, and besides a drawing he does of him killing his sister in front of his family, Michael remains withdrawn throughout the rest of the story, and you see Loomis really cares for him at first and genuinely wants to try and figure out why he did what he did. He even has a brief conversation with Michael's mother, letting him know that there's no progress. But then, one day, Michael is being bullied by a nice, lovely Italian-Irish boy named Tony and stabs him in the eye. Loomis decides that there's more to Michael than meets the unstabbed eye and decides that he is evil and wants to lock him up forever. He needs help convincing his boss to lock Michael away, and he gets assistance from Dr. Hill. But unfortunately, they are not able to convince Dr. Carpenter, and Michael remains with the rest of the juvenile kids. One by one, Michael kills the kids, but always gets away with it because there's never any witnesses. Then we get our first big revelation. Dr. Loomis was engaged to Dr. Hill. And Michael murdered her. I feel like this was critical need to know information. It would explain why Loomis has such a personal hatred for Michael. Because when you watch those films, it's like, okay, he stood in a room and did nothing for 15 years. Why do you hate him so much? At the same time, though, it does bring up a little bit of a plot hole, because whenever Loomis goes around warning people of Michael, he probably would open with, "He murdered my fiance!" He would probably bring that up first before anything else. So, yeah, it's interesting to read in the moment, but when you think about it in context of the films, it doesn't actually work. The comic ends with Michael attacking Tommy, only to get shot a bunch and have his face lit on fire. But as we know, fire and bullets mean nothing to Michael Myers. This first issue is off to a strong start. Obviously, there's no need for an origin story to Michael other than that first initial killing. I think we got all the information we needed to get from the original Halloween. But when it comes to seeing a young Michael in Smith's Grove and Loomis dealing with him, it's interesting. It ended up being used in a later film. It was not as interesting as this. Issue 2 reintroduces us to the character Richie, the kid who bumped into Michael in the first film. Apparently, Michael caused a domino effect that led to him having a shitty life, and he's ready to take it out on the old Myers place. Tommy bumps into Lonnie, his bully from the first film, who is more homophobic than he is in the new films. While that happens, it turns out Sheriff Brackett killed Richie by accident. I like this panel of Michael spying on Tommy, who's spying on Sheriff Brackett. It's pretty funny. Also, Michael's mask is now partially burnt, which would show up in yet another future Halloween film. Tommy confronts Brackett, and now we get the whole history of Haddonfield. The town was built by secret druids who were posing as pilgrims. They fled during the witch trials and established the town. And wouldn't you know it, one of them was Murphy Myers. Murphy's bloodline was cursed 2,000 years before this. The women in the family got visions and mind-reading powers, and the men got, I don't know, evil, killer, bullet immunity, grow your eyes back, can't be burnt to death powers? It gets more complicated, don't worry. So the town sacrifices prisoners and whatnot so they didn't have to be murderers all the time. But Michael being born on Halloween apparently changed all that. He was a stillborn that some old midwife was going to toss in the fire until he sprung to life. So he was born without a soul, I guess. Also, Judith apparently got around, and then it suggested there might have been something incestuous with her and her dad, which feels like the weird subplot that they had in the producer's cut of Curse of Michael Myers.
Happy Halloween, little girl.
So I guess they liked that detail and were upset it didn't make it into the theatrical version, so they're reintroducing it here into this script. A little bizarre. This conversation gets ambushed by the Thorn cult, who are now led by Mrs. Blankenship. She didn't feel like the leader or a high-ranking member of the cult in that film.
Mrs. Blankenship, oh God, hurry, we have to...
Hello, dear.
Then again, both versions of that film have a very convoluted, confusing cult storyline anyway, so maybe she was, I don't know. Also, it's a little confusing here. Michael now has a new mask. I'm guessing he got it from someone who was wearing the same thing. We see someone later holding up the burnt mask, but the panels feel like they're out of order or one of them's missing. It's very confusing, this whole page. I'm not sure what's going on and how he got this new mask. Anyways, Michael attacks the church and kills the Thorn cult member who was posing as a priest. Oh, they light his head on fire again, so he got that new mask for nothing. The cult frames Tommy, and now he's in an insane asylum. This issue was a mess. It's nowhere near as strong as the first one. It's a little overly convoluted. Again, everything with the Thorn cult is definitely overly convoluted. You know, it really is funny that, like, again, both versions of the movie, I'm still not really sure on what the cult's motivation in Endgame was. It definitely changes between cuts. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's so confusing and nonsensical that the more you try to explain it like this comic did, the less it makes sense. It's like this weird, bizarre thing. Yeah, nowhere near as good as the first issue. I'm now just confused and annoyed, and I kind of want them to just get on with it. So yeah, let's do that. Issue 3. Issue 3 opens up 2 years later. I guess Dr. Wynn survived the massacre at the end of Curse of Michael Myers? Or maybe this is picking up from the producer's cut, where I thought he also died and passed on something to Loomis. Anyway, he plans to sacrifice Tommy. Wynn informs him that Laurie Strode is not missing, she's dead. Then Tommy breaks out of the asylum. He spots Michael on the way out, but doesn't turn around to kill him, even though that's now his mission. Then it shifts focus to Lindsay Wallace, the other little kid from the first film, who is now a writer for a paper. We get caught up by a news report that Laurie Strode went missing after Halloween H2O. They found Myers' body burnt, but they never found his head. So it gets a little jarring here. She said that the Laurie Strode thing happened 1 year prior to this, but Tommy's been locked up for 2 years. I was under the impression, because, this came out in 2001, that this story started post H2O, but apparently not. So everything now in this issue is post H2O, and I guess that explains why none of the H2O stuff was brought up in the first 2 issues. So I guess we're in 1999 now. I really wish they would have given us years in the previous 2 issues, because I'm now completely lost. This totally changes everything. So now the H2O stuff is just being shoehorned last minute. Let's see if it works. The corpses of Bobby, Annie, and Linda, who were victims in the first film, were dug up at a local cemetery. Tommy shows up at Lindsay's and she thinks he did it. He asks her if she has Loomis's diary, and we get another flashback. The midwife from Michael's birth reminds us of what we learned in the last issue. She kind of just repeats everything. Adds like a few details here and there, but apparently he wasn't born on Halloween. He was actually came to life November 1st, which is Day of the Dead. So yeah, thanks for that information. It turns out the missing corpses are in Lindsay's house, and Michael attacks. Lindsay gets out and runs all the way to the Myers house, but she decides she's done running. She's been running fro 23 years. Tommy and Lindsay attack Michael, and we get the answer we've been looking for. Okay, so I'm going to pause right here, because we're about to go into major spoiler territory. If you're invested in this story, and you want to see some of the stuff I've been leaving out, you should go legally purchase a copy of this out-of-print comic right now, and read the ending for yourself. Good luck. Chaos Comics, I think, was bought by Dynamite Comics, and I went to their website. I typed in Halloween in the search bar. Nothing came up. So yeah, go on eBay, Amazon, maybe Facebook Marketplace. Make sure you get a copy of this, There's also other ways you can get a copy. But anyway, while you're making up your mind, I'm going to give you a few seconds. I just want to talk about a few things. Halloween season is here. We have a lot of Halloween content on the channel. I want everyone to go back to last year and watch the Halloween in 5 minutes parody we did. It was a lot of fun. We condensed the first movie down into 5 minutes, but we added like a bunch of tongue-in-cheek jokes and actually poked fun at some of the sequels there. I actually have a whole Halloween playlist with Halloween-related videos that I've done on this channel and off the channel. And over on Patreon, I have multiple commentary tracks. I have 2 solo ones I did for Halloween and Halloween 2018. I did Halloween 3 with Crystal and Justin. And I did Halloween Kills with Cecil from Good Bad Flicks. So a lot of stuff over there. A lot of Halloween content on this channel. We really did a lot of Halloween stuff. I guess because the new movies were out. It's kind of actually slow this year when it comes to Halloween stuff. Anyway, have you made up your mind? Did you read the book and now you're ready to see my reaction and my thoughts of it? Or you just say, screw it, I want to just know what Tony has to think, and you just listen to that entire rant? Well, here we go. Michael's mask is removed. And it's Laurie Strode. She tackles Tommy out of a window and kills him. Somehow she survives this incident, and weeks later we get a scene that's basically the ending of Psycho. They even named the doctor Dr. Block, as in Robert Block, the author of Psycho. By the way, we have a review for the original Psycho on this channel, and a commentary for the 98 remake. Let's keep going. Apparently Laurie couldn't live without the idea of Michael stalking her, so she became him. Or the Thorn curse got to her. I'm not sure. It ends with her staring out a window while Dr. Wynn watches. Wow. What an ending. You know, I'll give them credit for at least going with the copycat idea. It's something that the series has teased and attempted, and both times kind of chickened out from committing to the idea. So it was nice to see them actually go forward with it. And it's even more interesting that it is like the series' main protagonist pretty much becoming the bad guy. It reminds me of what they were trying to do with Tommy Jarvis in Friday the 13th. How the ending of 4 makes him look like he's crazy now. And the ending of 5, actually all throughout 5, they make you think Tommy's the bad guy, but he's not. But at the end, it might seem like he's going to be. And then they just totally ignored that in part 6, which is fine because 6 is awesome. So it was nice to see them actually commit to the idea. Overall, though, this comic is very bizarre. I honestly didn't realize the first 2 issues were pre-H2O. When I read this last year, I was under the impression it was all post-H2O. It wasn't until I reread it. That kind of makes things confusing. Because I guess the first 2 issues were the original Michael Myers. And he's totally disconnected from the Laurie Michael Myers. And the H2O stuff just feels like it's just plopped in right now. And in both cases, it's weird that none of the supporting characters from 6 or H2O show up in this. They bring all the supporting characters back from the original film. But yeah, the Karen, Danny, Steven, who's Michael's son, nephew. Probably be interesting to see what he's up to. Or even John, Laurie's son. You figure they would participate in the story to some degree, but they do not. Yeah, it's an interesting idea. The best stuff was the Loomis flashback stuff. I could have read a million issues of that because that was really cool. It would get ridiculous after a while. If, like on the 100th murder, they can't be like, well, it's just an accident. But no, that was fun to read. The twist was interesting, even though it was not fully earned, if I think about it. Mostly the cult stuff kind of just clashes with the rest of the story. Yeah, I know there are fans of Halloween 6. I used to be a mega fan of Halloween 6. I was like real into that movie. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, this isn't that good. And this comic's attempt to combine the 2 continuities with the assistance of the guy who wrote one of them. It was a bold effort. Didn't really work for me, though. But did it work for you? Are you able to read this comic and fully accept that these films are now connected? I think the biggest offense this comic makes is that it makes Halloween Resurrection non-existent. And I refuse to live in a world where that film is not canon. Because as we all know, if you watch the movie dumpster episode, I'm the biggest Resurrection fan. So yeah, I pick Resurrection over this comic any day when it comes to following H2O. Yes, let me know what you think of this. Did you like this comic? Were you aware of this comic? I've done a few comic things on here. A while back, I talked about Batman 89's comic and if it would be canon with The Flash. And earlier this year, in January, I did the Jason X comics. I did the one that picks up where the movie left off. And then I did another one where Uber Jason fights regular Jason. How'd they pull that off? Well, you'll just have to watch the video or read the book if you can find it. So check that out. I might be doing another comic review next week for Jason versus Leatherface. That was the old Topps comic storyline. So yeah, let me know what you think. Suggest some other slasher comics for me. I have a bunch of issues of Hack Slash, and it does a crossover with the Hatchet franchise. I might dive into those. I've had them for years. I've never actually read them. They were donated to me. Yeah, and if you have any weird slasher horror movie comics you want to donate to me, we have a P.O. box. Send them my way. Yeah, let me know what you think. Do you like these? Do you like these films? Do you like H2O? Are you glad they're connected? Let me know. Would you rather them be separate? Also, let me know that. Go back and check out all those other Halloween videos I recommended, and we will see you later on this month for plenty of more horror stuff. I mean, I talk about horror all year long, but we go really hard in October. Anyway, goodbye.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our other videos and Patreon page.